wherever you are. It might be evening or afternoon, but good day to you. Well, we're very pleased that the Commonwealth Tribute to Life has been launched on 14th of March. You might have seen seen the program either face-to-face or virtually, and it was a very successful launch, but it's to be followed by the webinars as we suggested. This is first of the webinar series, and we're very pleased and happy that you are able to join us. If you're not able to join us, you'll be able to see the recordings later on. Well, we've got an excellent panel today. The panel consists of Dale Gardner and Sunil Shroff, and I'm very ably and assisted by co-chair Elizabeth Buggins. I think most of you would know Dale and Sunil. Dale is Associate Medical Director of NHS BT. His contributions towards organ donation are phenomenal. In fact, they are too many to mention here because it'll take webinars time and I don't want to do that. But Dale has been absolutely instrumental in bringing Tribute to Life project on board. And it is credit to him that these webinar series have started. So Dale has been able to do that very successfully. And we hope that this educational program of Tribute to Life carries on with a number of webinars, which we'll be very pleased to have various speakers from various parts of Commonwealth. Going on to Sunil, it's very difficult to introduce Sunil because he was the key person behind all this that we did. Tribute to Life was his dream, which came true. And I think the webinars are going to be phenomenally helpful because the Mohan Foundation's contributions have been immense. He holds so many offices. If I mention those, the time will soon be over and I do not do that. But he is president of ISOT. He's also president of NUTS, and he has done a phenomenal amount of work for organ donation. Going on to Elizabeth Buggins. Elizabeth's career has focused on bringing together people to improve healthcare, whether as a facilitator within patients group, as chair of NHS organizations, or of the UK's organ donation task force. She has helped create a culture where everyone can contribute. The organ donation task force built a donation structure and culture which has underpinned a 90% plus increase in organs available for transplant across the UK over the past 15 years. And that is going to be the main ethos of all this webinar today anyway. So I'm very pleased that we have got a fantastic panel, and I'm going to ask Dale to talk about this wonderful subject. Dale, over to you.
Thank you, Sunil. Thank you, Elizabeth. And thank you, Satya. And thank you, everyone, for joining us. I'm now just going to share my slides and take us through changing donation culture. So as you've heard, I'm an intensive care consultant at Nottingham and the Associate Medical Director, and I've no other disclosures to make. What I really want to cover today, I'm going to focus in on the hospital side of changing donation culture, because in the UK, that's what's really changed the most. There will be other talks in this webinar series that will really tackle some of the promotion aspects and dealing with society. So my focus is predominantly to outline our journey so far in the UK, to recognize that donations in ICU matter, to state the need for a donation cultural vision, the need to invest in people, the ethical and legal uncertainty and ideas of how to resolve them, how to use data powerfully, public recognition, and where I see the future for the UK in donation cultural change. This is our journey to date, and that little blip of our deceased donors dropping over the sort of the last 12 months, 2 years is really, obviously, as everyone knows, related to COVID. And so for the talk per se, I'm going to focus in on those years until COVID, because I think that's where our journey has. We have to return to basics at the moment. And I also want to highlight that as good as people may look up to the United Kingdom with our donation and transplantation program, in some of the league tables of Spain and the USA and other nations, we are middle order of this league table I'm displaying here. So there's still much more we need to do to grow, and much more we can learn from others. But our journey to date has made a difference. And I love this slide. This slide illustrates what can be achieved by increasing donation and transplantation. So what you have here in the yellow is anyone on dialysis in the United Kingdom. That means if they're on peritoneal dialysis or hemodialysis, there's the yellow line. And somewhere around 2012, we changed. We made transplant, a working transplant, the #1 form of renal replacement therapy in the UK. And that has huge advantages because it allows people who were just existing on dialysis to actually start living again. And from a cost-effective point of view, it's actually very cost-effective. So how did we do that? Our journey began with a cultural shift. We started to move to the concept that donation's not a transplant matter. When you're talking about donation, especially deceased donation, it's not a matter for transplant doctors and nurses and surgeons. It's a matter for intensive care. It's an intensive care matter. It's part of end-of-life care. And I ask anyone who wants to change their culture, who from your intensive care nationally will champion donation, or who locally will champion donation? And we were very blessed with the first national clinical lead for organ donation, whose role I now fulfill, Dr. Paul Murphy, where he actually pointed the way and said, this is an intensive care matter, and changed the whole landscape for us in the United Kingdom. Now, we didn't get this idea from nowhere. We actually stole it from Spain with Rafael Martinez very much said that when he's talking about intensive care, this is by far the target group on which the efforts to improve organ donation must be concentrated. And we in the United Kingdom really took it to heart. In 2008, the Organ Donation Task Force reported, and Elizabeth Buggins, who's chairing today, was very much a part of this. And what it called for was a paradigm shift in our cultural attitude towards donation. And previously, there was a belief that donation was something that was potentially inflicted upon patients. It's something that happens to someone for the benefit of someone else. Rather, we believe now it's a fundamental component of good end-of-life care. It should be a usual part of good end-of-life care. How do we do this then? Because you can state that vision, but you need building blocks, and the building blocks are always people, not documents, but people. And we said we need to embrace donation as a usual part of care, and we needed the right people to do this. And the people we built was what we call the triumvirate of people within every acute hospital in the NHS: a clinical lead for organ donation, a doctor, usually an intensive care doctor who championed donation, a non-clinical donation committee chair to run a donation committee to look at the barriers locally, and a specialist nurse for organ donation to really power that team and to drive things forward. We brought our transplant nurses out of transplant and made them donation nurses, and we put them in intensive care. That was the big change. And it made a massive difference. In that first 5 years, we increased donation by 50%. And it's very interesting in telling how we did this. So we've got the team, they've got that message. What happened? Well, what happened is we doubled in the UK the number of families we approached. So if you have a 60% consent rate and you approach 100 families, you get 60 people saying yes. If you approach 1,000 families, 600 say yes. We doubled the number of families we approached. That was the key to our first success. We just got braver. In the past, we might have picked and chose which families to approach, which ones maybe were not so angry, which ones seemed to be maybe more generous. But in the end, what we decided, no, we approach everyone where it's clinically suitable. We will go in and we will approach. And that's where we got our success. We just referred more, we approached more, and we had amazing success in those early years. And we also had to resolve the outstanding legal, ethical, and professional issues, because there was nervousness in our clinical community about what is right. Can we do this? Can we not do that? And a spate of documents came out over those early years in our cultural change, where we really published from many different organizations guidance, not just from NHS Blood and Transplant. In fact, none of these documents are the sole author of NHS Blood and Transplant. All different groups, including the General Medical Council, which put a duty on doctors to explore donations, and legal guidance, which really established that best interest extends beyond physical care. We also collected and used data powerfully. We have run the potential donor audit, where every person who dies in our intensive care and emergency departments under the age of 80 years old is the specialist nurse run through a series of questions and give us enormously powerful data on them to know. And then we can compare different hospitals. So this is actually specialist nurse involvement in discussions with family, and they've versus the number of families approached on the x-axis. And you can see this scattergun approach of each of those little dots represents a different hospital and how they're using the specialist nurse. And this was a slide from a number of years ago in the early days where there was a big spread, but we have moved people out of the red and out of the amber and into sort of the average and even to the silver and gold areas. As we actually will publicly display this in meetings, share it publicly on the website so people can see and compare themselves, and so we can all grow together. Now, we thought specialist nurse involvement was important, and we really put a lot of emphasis on that. And this is our journey of bringing specialist nurses into the conversation with families to have those approach conversations for organ donation. And you can see we've gone from 63% back in 2011-12 up to 92% of our approaches about donation are held with a doctor, a bedside nurse, and a specialist nurse for organ donation. And we've got evidence, powerful evidence, which we published in 2021, that this makes a massive difference. Those odds ratios are reversed. They're what happens if we don't have a specialist nurse involved in the family approach, and it's very, very poor without that support. So that was our first strategy, really taking us forward with that. Over those initial years, as we doubled the numbers of families we approached, our consent authorization rate stayed much the same in the United Kingdom, which makes sense because we were no longer picking and choosing ourselves. We were actually taking a approach everyone. Our next strategy took us to the belief that we needed a revolution in consent. And we have achieved that if you look at that rising numbers there in our blue line of consent authorization. And we did that through emphasizing that collaborative approach with bringing the specialist nurse in for those conversations, as you will see there, but also with regard to training. Some of our specialist nurses became specialist requesters who actually had expertise in the family approach and took on that role more. We also started simulation courses for our intensive care doctors in training so that they would come into a specialist role as a consultant, ready and active and powerfully able to support donation and have these difficult conversations. Our media and marketing campaigns altered, and you'll hear about them in future webinars. We did a lot locally and nationally to recognize donors and say that big thank you. And you can see from this some of the donation memorials, just as in many parts of the United Kingdom, there are in parks and public places, there are war memorials. Nearly all the hospitals in the United Kingdom now have a tribute or memorial to organ donors and tissue donors. And they're just absolutely beautiful works of art. We've also do public advertising in our hospitals, as you can see in the bottom left, and we have a national award, the Order of St. John Award for organ donation. It's offered posthumously to every deceased donor, which the family accepts on their behalf in regional ceremonies or by post, depending on what the family would want. And that award, the Order of St. John, it's an order of chivalry, and the head of that order is Her Majesty the Queen. So this is quite a prestigious recognition that we are able to give our donor families. We now have a new strategy taking us all the way to 2030, and we're going to have a big focus on making sure that the gift of donation, the transplants actually come through and follow through with that. And so we're really pleased by that, but we're not forgetting donation in this new strategy. I think in the United Kingdom, we have succeeded in making donation usual. It's a usual part of end-of-life care. No one is surprised when it's occurring in our intensive care units. The next step is to make it expected, not mandatory. There will always be families who say no. There will always be situations where it's not possible. But we need to create that culture where it's just like a shock. What did you mean you forgot to refer? Like, we always refer. That's what we expect you to do. What do you mean you went in and spoke to the family without a specialist nurse? Like, that's a bit strange. Like, that's not what we do. We need to move it to that stage. And we also need to change society where, of course they donated. That's what you do. If you're dying, you can help other people. Yeah, that's what happens. And to make it more expected in our society. And if you look to those from that earlier graph, countries like Spain, that's exactly what's happened. There's an expectation in their hospitals and society that donation will follow. And that's where we want to take our culture next. We are getting some help with this from our governments in the United Kingdom. All governments in the United Kingdom have now passed legislation to bring in opt-out, or what we call deemed legislation, deemed consent and authorization. And I really want to highlight not so much the law, but the public support as evidenced by our politicians. Look at those votes from our politicians. This sort of cross-party, across political divide support for ordination is unheralded. Very little in our society gets this much support by our politicians all together. You can see this, those overwhelming yeses. In England, it was a private members bill, which means it wasn't officially starting off as government policy, but in the end, all parties supported, and it was no one formally objected to it. And very recently in Northern Ireland, again, massive support from across both sides of politics to support a change. So there is enormous support in the United Kingdom for organ donation and transplantation. That didn't come overnight. That was a longer term cultural change. But I think as we started to improve, society has come with us. And this gives us a mandate, I believe, for us to push and develop donation and transplantation more, because society says, go forth, make sure, do more to actually make this gift a possibility for people. So a very quick run through of our cultural change that's actually occurred and where we're going to go in the United Kingdom. But if I could just leave with one final message for you all of what I think is the fundamental, if you want to increase organ donation in your country, if you want to change donation culture, what you need to do is take an intensive care doctor like I was, working in busy intensive care where donation is only a small part of what I do, and give me and other intensive care doctors a heart, a focus, a belief that donation is part of just standard, usual end-of-life care. And that is how you can make that step forward and changing your donation culture. Thanks very much.
Thank you, Dale. That was excellent presentation. I'm very grateful to you for sharing some of the ideas, which I'm sure will be very helpful in the future. And thank you for taking us through the journey and the history of all this, which is so very useful, probably known to some, but vast majority of people will find it beneficial, that they've learned quite a lot through your talk. So thank you very much indeed. From intensive care doctor, we move on to somebody who has got experience of organ donation, both in intensive care as well as in the public arena. So I'm going to invite Dr. Sunil Shroff to share his view and vision about the subject today. Over to you, Sunil.
Thank you, Satya. And what an excellent presentation coming from Dale. I only wish I could, exchange places with him. I am going to talk to you about what is happening in emerging programs, and then talk a little bit about our own experience with Mohan Foundation, how we have gone forward in this program in the next 15 minutes or so. As you know, in Asia, we have 8 Commonwealth countries with a population of almost 1.7 billion people. Most populous is India, and followed by Pakistan and Bangladesh. And of these, 6 countries do some kind of living or disease donation rate. These are figures of last 6 years, which I got from GODT data. And as you see, India does a lot of organ transplants, but not enough. But if you look at the per million population rate, Singapore and Sri Lanka do more than India does. Be it kidney or, for that matter, living or disease liver transplant. Again, the number-wise in India, we do quite a lot, but per million population, it is quite abysmal compared to other countries. We need to do a lot more. It's a similar story with heart and lung transplant. Our program in India is perhaps still in infancy. And our story in this region in Asia is more to do with tribulations, with trials, and some triumphs in the program in the last 20, 25 years. And I'm going to take you through this journey. Chronic kidney disease in Commonwealth countries, the requirement for kidneys in this region is huge, almost goes to 450,000 kidneys per year. I don't think so we will ever get to, fill this gap of between the demand and supply. Of about 450,000 people require a kidney, or only about 100,000 get some kind of renal replacement therapy. The incidence of end-stage kidney disease in this region, like in India and Bangladesh, is about 232 per million population, whereas in a country like Singapore, it is about almost 503 per million population. And this is rising because of the increase in diabetes and hypertension. So to create an enabling, the living donation program has really, to be honest, has only so much it can do. It has peaked. The only hope is the disease donor program to go forward to take care of many of these patients. So how do you create an enabling ecosystem for this program? What you require is a lot of cooperation between the government, be it the central or state, to get the right regulations and laws in place, along with the hospitals, partnership with both government and private hospital. In this region, the private hospitals dominate the healthcare field, and so does it in transplant. And then you need to have the public and the media on your side, along with supporting NGOs like us to help with capacity building, to help to continue to give some kind of fuel to the program and keep it going. So broadly, there are challenges in implementing a disease donation program in this region, and we need to change the culture, and I'll tell you how we have been able to do this. About a few years back, I wrote this editorial in our Indian Journal of Organ Transplantation, and one of the requirements I think in this region is to have very good trauma centers and intensive care facilities in major cities, which doesn't happen. We need to do capacity building, we need to do training and so on, and also look at organ commerce to stop that. There are societal issues for the low donation rate. People say it is religion and cultural barriers, but I think it's more due to the myths. There are also mistrust in the healthcare system. As I said, private healthcare dominates in this region. And that's why, more mistrust is created, and that doesn't help the program. There are misconceptions about brain death among the public and also among the doctors, I would say. In this region, decision-making is mainly by the male. Marriages are usually of a race type. There is gender segregation in congregations generally. Asia also has, origin of many religions like Buddhism, Hinduism, Jainism, Sikhism, and so on. So the Asian countries are rich in religious and moral teachings. So giving something is very good in this religion, and saving a life supersedes everything else. And based on this, organ donation fulfills the highest religious virtues. So none of the religions are against organ donation. We do have a problem with Islam and organ donation in this region, because the disease donation rate is very low among the Muslims in this region. Because many believe that removal of an organ violates sanctity of the body. God created us as whole, and we should return as whole. So these are kind of thoughts. But many of the Muslim countries, in the Middle East, are doing many more donations. Like the example is Iran, and we are trying to engage our mullahs and get some good fatwas in place to improve our donation rate among the Muslim population in this region. Some of these countries import corneas, so if you can get a transplant, obviously you should be able to donate as well. We also have organ commerce in this region. We keep getting this every so often we have a story like this which is flashed in the media, and that becomes a dampener for the program, and the disease donation numbers start coming down when something like this happens. So we need to practice ethical organ donation, and that needs to be impressed on the public and the government, that we need to keep our regulations very tight in this program so that this doesn't happen. Public engagement can improve organ donation. Certainly it can. We have to create awareness among the young. We do that with Mohan Foundation. We keep doing awareness campaigns almost every day in the corporates. We also need to engage our celebrities, our politicians, our people who can actually help with this whole cause, and will help to change the ideas of perception of people on organ donation. And we have engaged many celebrities in this program over the years, and that also does have some little effect on the program overall. this we do for the schools and colleges, we do what we call angels of change, and these are young people. We kind of train them so that they can start doing education and educating their friends and other colleagues, so that they can promote organ donation. And this is one such school where we trained them, and then they went on to do this. So this is in the mall, and they performed in the mall. And so these kind of flash mobs, which you've done many times in malls and so on, does get a lot more engagement with organ donation. At least people do notice and talk about this. So we do this, a lot of public engagement. This is what we did in 2013-14, just to show you that in between 13 and 14, our number of pledges increased, and as well number of pledges increased, our programs of awareness increased, our conversion rate in organ donation also increased in the 2 years. Almost it doubled in 2 years in that period of time. And public awareness may have been one of the reasons for this increase in the awareness. Our focus audience for creating awareness is usually the young lot, because these are unfortunately, the age group of people who have traumatic road traffic accidents. So we feel that the age between 20 and 40 is a very important age to create awareness in this. If you want to, get better kind of conversion rates for organ donation. We're also promoting their family donor card, so that the conversation for organ donation becomes easier. And many times, we educate a youngster, and that youngster goes to the house and speaks to their parents, and then the whole family comes forward for organ donation. So we have introduced this family donor card, which is a little different from what you have in the West. We also have these kind of scenarios, unfortunately, on the roads. Again, honoring donor families does create a good feel factor. We do honor the donor families very regularly, and we use the governors and the state authorities to honor the donor families. So it is a very important function, and that again creates a lot of good feel factor. We also do hospital empowerment. I think this is very important, that to educate the public, but we also feel it's equally important to educate the doctors in this field and the paramedical staff about organ donation, issues related to disease donation, because we feel that while the public is very giving in this part of the world, sometimes the problems are more with the doctors, their anxieties, their nervousness, they're not accepting the brain death, as even Dale mentioned. Those kind of inhibitions need to go, and we need to have conversations with them. So these are many sensitization programs over the years which we've done. And we work with the hospitals very closely, and we always tell them that if you want to do a disease donation successfully in your hospital, you need to have the head of the hospital, be director or superintendent, involved in the program, and you need to have monthly meetings with all the stakeholders in the hospital, be it the intensive care, be it the neuro people, be it the transplant team, the nursing care, and so on, and put a lot of systems in place, have standard operating procedures for identification of brain death, certification, maintenance protocols, and we do have a lot of medical legal cases which goes to postmortem. So those things needs to be defined as well. So these kind of robust kind of standard operating systems also helps hospital to take this program forward, and we try to impress that. We know that Spain, we talk about Spain always in organ donation because the rate is high, but Spain does have opt-out, and many people in India have said that we should have opt-out in India as well. But we feel, if you look at Spain's example, Spain had opt-out. Spain's opt-out immediately increased the donor pool, but it does not guarantee increase in donation rate. They had presumed consent for 10 years, and they didn't have an increase in organ donation rate till this gentleman came on the scene and appointed transplant coordinators in ICU and physicians, supported by nurses. He conducted training and mass media campaigns, and then their rate increased. And as we saw in Dale's presentation, that your conversion rate is almost 92% today. And the organ donation is a usual, even not an unusual, even in the hospital. In India, we are still, in infancy in this program. It will take time for us to go forward. There are some examples. Awareness does work. We always believe, look, if you look at the colon donation and blood donation rates in India, it's pretty high. We do about close to 70,000 colon donations in India. We also do 11 million blood donations every year. And this has happened because NGOs and volunteers have championed the cause. And we feel that a similar championing from the NGOs in India will help the disease donation program as well. Training is very important of the coordinators for requesting for organ donation. As Dale himself said, training of ICU doctors is important in this area. To training for coordinators to support family in the decision to donate. As Mohan Foundation, we've trained 3,000 coordinators over 12 years, and our impact is almost 65% conversion rate. Brain death, again, ICU, we have conducted many workshops, and training of surgeons is equally important for how to retrieve organs and transplant organs, and we've done that with the Oxford group. This is one training workshop for the transplant coordinators. We teach them not only coordination, but also resuscitation techniques and so on in the workshop, and how to have a conversation with the families during organ donation. We had, we work with government hospitals very closely at Mohan Foundation, and we have had an MOU with many hospitals, large hospitals in this part of the region. And this is one of the hospitals where we worked. In about 10 years, we identified about, certified about 299 brain deaths, in which we had 198 yes for donation and almost 66% conversion rate. By a trained counselor, we had a good conversion rate, and this led to 136 donations, 136 donors with many, many organs and tissues, just an example. And from that, we also had, one heart transplant recipient who wanted to be a coordinator, because, she felt that she was alive, because of the, good coordinators talking to the family. So she took up our course. We do have a lot of online courses now for the coordinators, for the surgeons, for the ICU professionals, so on. Our Oxford workshop for surgical retrieval, again, we've been doing it after this MOU, which we signed with, NHSBT in 2015. And, we have done many organ retrieval workshops in our wet lab, and that has had a huge impact as well. And we've had 18 heart transplants performed in 2 public sector government hospitals, free of cost. And this is one of the surgeons who performed heart transplant. He'd never seen a heart transplant before. He attended the workshop and did a heart transplant. So from 2012 to 17, if you look at the figures, you see these donations. These are donors. We had only 196 donors in India in 2012. Come 2017, we had almost 900 donors, and multiple organs came from those donations. And this increasing graph has been due to what I have shown you previously in all my slides. And our rate of donation went up almost 4.5 times in 5 years. This is a slide again from Tamil Nadu from 2014 to 16. As the disease donor numbers of kidneys went up, our dependence on live kidney transplant started coming down. So in India, these are green, India is a huge country. These are the green areas are the areas where we do disease donation. Out of the 38 states and union territories we have, only 16 do some kind of transplant in our country. So that's why our perhaps figures are also very low of how many donations we do in the country. Every day we do 3 multi-organ donations at the moment, and we need to do much more, of course. What we require for a successful program to happen is a lot of cooperation between the state health machinery with the government hospitals, private hospitals, public at large, and NGO. I'm reminded of what Mother Teresa said. She said, I can do things you cannot, you can do things I cannot. But together we can do great things, and that's what is required in this program. A lot of cooperation between different stakeholders to go forward. There are many NGOs working in this program besides Mohan Foundation, and the credit for this program to have come so far in India is due to a lot of championing from these organizations as well. So in conclusion, Asia is a very highly populated region with strong cultural belief, with a family hierarchy dominates in decision making. What holds back people in donating is not religion, it's cultural reservations and myths. And these are sometimes perpetuated by media and movies in this region. Constant mass media awareness campaigns do have positive stories, do help the program. The hospital top management, along with other stakeholders in the program, can help change the donation culture definitely. And capacity building within hospitals to train staff is a need of the hour for a culture shift in donation to happen in these emerging programs. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Sunil, for, again, a fantastic presentation. You have had 2 excellent presentations, and it goes without saying that each country has its own needs. Each country has its own texture where the things can be done in a very different way. However, there's a lot of food for thought in these 2 presentations, and you may wish to apply some of those in your own countries. You may wish to innovate and have some of your own applications, which is great. But the time is here for some question and answers. I know that there have been some questions raised, and I'm going to hand over to Elizabeth Buggins for taking you through the journey of question and answer session.
Thank you very much, Satya, and thank you to Dale and to Sunil. I think they set out very clearly what has delivered some significant improvements in our two countries. And our cultural history is quite different, but actually there's so much commonality between the things that have worked that it was really striking listening to you talking back to back there. The one thing, Dale, perhaps you didn't pick up on is the religious dimension in the UK, because that's been a significant part of the work that's gone on to gain some public confidence in organ donation and the ability to donate, isn't it? I mean, it's still a real problem for us in that people from minority communities in the UK wait longer for organs. They're more likely to die while they're waiting. They donate still in fewer numbers, and that's been thought to be both have a religious dimension, but also a cultural dimension. And yet we had all of our religious leaders, our national ones, on a platform together as part of the work that NHSBT did to say that donation is part of that religious culture and it's supported by their religion. Can you just unpack that a little bit for us? And I think, Sunil, then if you want to come back and enrich that, I think that would be useful to everybody.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Yeah, no, great questions. I mean, making donation transplantation equitable across the UK is a huge challenge that we sort of really only starting to tackle in strong ways in the last few years. I think it reflects a difference in perspective. If you think in terms of just generally the United Kingdom and comparing it to what Sunil shared with us, if we, in survey after survey, nearly 90% of the UK population supported donation. And what we needed to change was just what the answer was when they were actually asked in real life, when it was actually happening to them. And that was what we sort of, and that we're working with doctors and working with preparing the public for those conversations. But in our ethnic minorities, I think they very much are closer in perspective to what we heard from Sunil. Like this, many of us have come from the Commonwealth in the first place. And actually, I think our plans and what we were doing as in the nation was not addressing their needs and not having that cultural sensitivity that we really needed to achieve from. And part of this whole Commonwealth project is for us to learn from others and to be better at that. But a lot of work is happening right now. And ironically, some might have thought that bringing in opt-out, presumed consent would actually cause difficulty to us. I think it's actually given us the best opportunity for conversations in the United Kingdom across all ethnic groups than we've ever had. Because of the law change, it's opened up doors, it's opened up dialogue, and that's been very powerful. So a lot of work is happening, but there's a lot more we can learn to really address people's needs.
Thanks, Dale. Sunil, anything you'd like to add?
Yes, thank you so much for giving me an opportunity. You know, the thing with Islam and organ donation is you must remember that in Iran, among the Shia population, their conversion rate is 80 to 90%. And they are doing a phenomenal work in disease donation program. I personally think we require, ongoing engagement of the faith leaders along with the public on the topic of organ donation, especially among the Islamic population. It's very much required because we are having problems with that in this part of the region. And sometimes there is a confusion exactly what Quran says on organ donation. Quran doesn't say that don't donate organs. Quran, at that time, obviously we have evolved so much, and at that time organ donation was not happening. So there's nothing written clearly about organ donation. But by and large, Quran is a very good textbook and a lot of moral teachings. And on most of the interpretations from some of the scholars is that organ donation is doable with Quran. There's no problem with the religion. It is just the cultural myths, just the myths which stop them. So we need to get the faith leaders of these of Islam to engage with the public on organ donation constantly. That is very much required. And in India, I can tell you instances where we have had Muslim donors, and they have gone and said to us, very quietly, please don't make this public. Don't make this announcement public. Because if you make it public, we may get disowned by our community. So, there is a fear. The fear is of the backlash they may get from the donation. And many of these, Muslim people have come themselves forward for donation. We have never asked them. When we explain to them that there's a brain death and they know about organ donation, we've had calls on our helpline, from people that we are, in this situation, we want to donate. What do we do? So it's not that the Muslims don't want to donate.
No.
It is just the way, the perceptions are in the community. So if we can get a strong faith leader to talk about it, our organ donation is acceptable in Quran, it will take away all the problems, believe me. I think we need to do that in India, we need to do that in Pakistan, we need to do that in Bangladesh, we need to do it in England. Because many of those, minority community in England is from this region.
Yeah, I agree, Sunil. Yeah, and we're on a journey, aren't we? But there's quite a lot more that we need to do in this particular area. I noticed from your slides how remarkable the performance of Singapore has been in donation. And I just wonder if there's anybody from Singapore who would like to comment on this. So if you would be willing to, perhaps you could put us a message in the chat and we'll try and bring you in. Okay, so while we're waiting for that, obviously religion is a big part of culture and we're looking at donation culture today. But what other cultural reservations regarding organ donation, apart from religion, have we had to overcome?
I would like to say one more thing. The social media today and the movies in this part of the world are also adding to the problem. And we are getting a lot of, these television serials and movies, which are very popular in this part of the world, sometimes showing organ donation in bad light, especially with brain death. Brain death is a new concept in this part of the region. And sometimes, they show organs having stolen and so on. And that again, like the movie Coma you had in the West. Similarly, we are having now that kind of movies happening in this part of the world. And that is not helping us either. So many times, many of the people who have picked up our organ donor cards, after seeing these movies, they write to us saying that we want to withdraw the donor card because we're worried. So organ trade is another area which, again, puts a lot of, problems with our whole disease donation program. As part of it.
Yeah. Yeah. And Dale, you've done a lot with the media, haven't you? And we've had a number of storylines, a huge amount of number of news articles that really focus on the success of transplants and the huge contribution that donation makes in that.
Yeah, I think that the decision to donate is often a very personal decision for a donor or a family. And I don't think we can get away from that, and nor should we. And I think what we've learned is that what resonates as human beings is stories. And as much as Sunil and I can get up and give our expertise, that won't unlock hearts and minds quite like someone else's personal story of a donor or a transplant recipient. And what we've very much tried to do is to share those stories across in our media to try to bring them forward. They're very powerful. The Order of St. John Award, an unexpected benefit of it, it wasn't set out to do this, it was set out as a thank you, is that it's led to many more families being able to share their story in local media, not just sort of, not always the big national media, but even local stories. And actually, because people are in smaller communities, they can really unlock a lot of sort of support for donation coming from local areas. And so you need those positive stories of different people. And so people can look and say, someone like me said yes. Yeah. And that is incredibly powerful. And that's been one of the things we've focused on.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the law in England is called Max and Kira's law, which is a story about a donor and a recipient. And I think the politicians have really helped us there, haven't they, in making it a human story rather than a technical surgical story, which may not connect with families in the same way.
Yeah, I'm compelled by the belief that when you advertise that a choice to donate is not a health decision.
No.
It's a personal decision. It's a social decision about your interaction with other people. And as much when I advertise donation, as you saw in the hospital, inside the hospital, it's not for public members, it's not for patients. We want those posters in there for staff. It's about educating staff and healthcare professionals. When you go out into the public, I mean, that the sort of mob dancing we saw, that's not a health thing you're advertising then, that's a social thing. Do you want to be part of something so vibrant, so alive? And people say, yes, I do. And I think that's when we think about our promotion, I think we need to have different stories for different audiences.
Yeah. So in the UK, we did some work several years ago now, which showed that our population, 1 in 4 get their views about healthcare from a health professional. So they're really important agents for change, and something I think is worth paying quite close attention to. But Sunil, in India, you were showing how effective the Angels of Change program is. Have there been any barriers to that you've had to overcome?
Sometimes, when we train, let's say about 500 of them, we can keep them engaged for some time. And then, of course, they're young people and they move on. So we not necessarily, are able to keep them with us for a long time. But once they have learned about the whole process, I think, from whatever feedback we get, they will keep promoting our donation. And we have had some fantastic ambassadors who started in school, now they're in college, and they're passed out from college, and they're coming to the organization field. So, you create this force who are very young, and some of these people afterwards, you hope, will come back to the program and do much more. So as far as barriers are concerned, I think keeping them engaged initially sometimes can be a challenge. Of about, let's say, 100 you kind of engage, you will get about, maybe 20-25% conversion rate. Many will drop out. So that's one challenge we have. Other than that, also the program is quite intense. So, sometimes, keeping them engaged, the whole program for Angels of Change takes them a day, and then they have to do an activity as well. So it's very intensely kind of done. So sometimes we do have dropouts in between the program as well. Other than that, we don't have any challenges as such. But it's a wonderful program. When we first started, we didn't know what challenges we were going to face. This was an idea of one of the transplant coordinators, and she took it forward. But now what we've done is the ones who actually, are in the program, we call them ambassadors of change, So we bring them back as ambassadors. And then we give them a little bit more encouragement to do much more. So we have actually from Angels, they become ambassadors. So we just upgrade them a little more.
Yeah, thank you. We've done quite a bit in schools in the UK, haven't we, Dale? And there's a lot of interest in programmes in schools. That's been quite difficult because of the curriculum requirements in our state education system. But are there any tips that you would like to give people who are listening as to how to approach it? What's been most successful?
So we've learned a lot of lessons from schools, and we have different programs depending on whether you're in Northern Ireland, Wales, Scotland, or England. And you identify quite rightly, Elizabeth, sometimes getting into the actual curriculum can be a challenge. So some of the lessons is, some people worry that if you go to younger, very primary age children, so under the age of 12, that's too young. But what we've found is actually that's not the case. You just have to have age appropriate material, and they're interested, and you can link it into learning about their bodies and what different organs doing, and you can listen to that. We've worked with a charity called the Anthony Nolan Trust, which actually is related to a bone marrow register to allow people to be saved through that, and linking with them has been really good for older people, older age children. But I think one of the key things we've really learned for us is actually the majority of our donors in the United Kingdom, unlike what we saw from Sunil's slide, are actually over the age of 50. In fact, in the UK, 60% of our donors are over the age of 50. And what we've learned with our schools campaign is it's less about what the child and young adult decides, but more as children, as powerful change makers, going home and talking to mum and dad and even grandma and granddad. And that's where a lot of our focus is using children to start family conversations. And that can be very powerful. And that's generally a lot of the focus is giving some education, but more importantly, to get conversations happening in families across the dinner table.
Yeah, thank you. And then something we've all experienced across the world over the last couple of years is the COVID pandemic. And that has shifted culture to a degree, hasn't it? It's made us more aware of issues that perhaps were under the surface before. What have we learned, do you think, about the cultural opportunities in our own countries, given the lessons that COVID has taught us? Sunil.
I think this meeting is happening this way because of COVID. You know, we are on Zoom, we are interconnected, we are not point to point, we are multi-point to multi-point, so many people watching. So I think we've gone virtual. We have learned to accept this kind of change, and very fast we've done this. You know, over 2 years, there's been a dramatic shift in work, how we work. Healthcare has been quite stressed in this part of the world, I must say. And we've had a very big hit as far as the donation rates are concerned. We had almost 40%, 50% drop in the donation rate. We have had a drop in the transplant rate. Patients have not come back to hospitals because of the fear factor of getting COVID. So we've had a lot of challenges because of COVID as far as healthcare is concerned. And I think it's slowly now going away, but still there. You know, we don't have the same footfalls. One advantage perhaps has been the hospitals in India are extremely busy, but with COVID, we have also taken telehealth as an option. So many of the routine patients who usually would come to the hospital and wait for hours now get a telehealth consultations. So the hospitals are a little less crowded, which is good overall for the program. You know, I think in the long run, that'll benefit the whole healthcare, you know, ecosystem in India. But definitely COVID has had a big hit in our part of the world as far as donation rate is concerned, much more than what you had in the West.
Thank you. I can see in this chat that Sally Kong has offered to make some comments. Can we patch Sally in?
Hopefully doing that right now, Elizabeth. Sally, we're trying to bring you in so you can, hopefully we can see and hear you. Hi, Sally.
Hi. We can't hear you.
Hi. Hello.
Yes.
Good evening. This is 8 o'clock over here in Singapore. Thank you for all the contributions from the panel. I mean, it's been very enlightening. Singapore has learned very much from all these best practices that that has been brought to us. We put in some of the initiatives that Dale talked about, Mohan talked about, and yes, we are driving a lot of things from the ICU level. You're correct in saying that organ donation is really ICU driven rather than the transplant community driven. Okay, so with that, we have also put in place quite a number of committees in the various acute hospitals for the ICU chairs to drive organ donation within their hospitals, but supported by National Organ Transplant Unit. But we don't have SNOTs like in UK, but we have our donor coordinators, which comes from our pool in NOTU, who will come in, and we try to engage the ICUs to activate us and involve us in the end of life discussions. So it is still work in progress. It is not easy to break into the ICU culture and for them to be comfortable with us, but some hospitals have really been very supportive and very cooperative. But like everything else, it is work in progress, and it is really a battle that we need to engage in.
Yeah, it's a long journey, isn't it?
Long journey, very long journey.
It's building on a number of fronts, and one of the things I think really helped in the UK was training everybody together as much as possible. So the organ donation chairs, the SNODs, the intensive care clinicians, and some of the transplant guys, and so there was a common understanding and a sense of social support amongst all of those different communities, which I think created a platform for the UK to improve its organ donation rates.
So we do invest in training for all our healthcare providers, especially ICU staff, and it's held every year. So we've been doing that for the last 13 years.
Wow.
And also we bring in our trainers and they are here with us for about a month. And then we run intensive sessions for our ICU teams.
Yes. Wonderful.
Fantastic, fantastic.
Thank you. It sounds great, and again, so much commonality across the different countries in the things that are delivering success. And I guess the challenges of COVID are going to be impacting us all for the next year, or
Yes.
so, especially while our health professional colleagues recover from what's been a really difficult 2 years. Well, thank you for that discussion, really useful, and I hope you have taken something away from that, everybody, which will help you in your own respective countries. And I'm going to hand back at this point to Satya.
Thank you very much, Elizabeth, for chairing this part of the webinar. You have heard two stories of success from different parts of Commonwealth countries, and ably explained by Dale, who is the chair of our International Advisory Panel, and also equally ably explained by Sunil, who is one of the coordinators for Asian countries. Well, those, as Elizabeth said, those have got a lot of common threads, but those have also got distinct features, how the things were achieved and how the journey actually progressed. But that's an inspiration for other parts of Commonwealth countries to take on and apply it as you wish, as you think it will be more successful. But a few messages are absolutely clear. One of the messages is that unless you train the health professionals and you take them on board, it's not going to happen. Dale's slide showing one of the doctors saying this is the way to do it in intensive care is so very powerful. But I have to say that the common knowledge says that there is a lot of ignorance even amongst health professionals, which has to be tackled. A lot of health professionals, as Elizabeth said, they depend on their health professionals' advice. And unless we really get all the health professionals enthusiastic about it, it's going to be rather a difficult one. Some of the health professionals might well say that this is not my specialty, but my personal belief is that organ donation is everybody's business, not a single person's business. Not if you're an ICU doctor or a SNOD. It's in every health professional's business to train people, and giving wrong or conflicted messages causes as much of a problem as anything else. Well, there is another difficulty, and that is that we have to join the two wheels. Let me explain what that means. The two wheels of the cart are the organ donation in public and the transplantation within the hospital sector. The two wheels must come together, because without one, the other cannot succeed. If there are not enough donors, the transplantation will not work. But even if there are enough donors, if there is no infrastructure, the transplantation will not work. So the two wheels must go hand in hand and in tandem. I'm very pleased that we have been able to talk about changing donation culture. Equally, the next series of webinars, which are on very important topics such as how to start transplantation from zero, and these are all very relevant topics. All these will empower us, enrich us. And if there is one single important function of Tribute to Life project, that is to educate and that is to learn from each other, that particular part will be successful, not because of any one, but because of all of us coming together and saying, this is our tribute to life. Thank you so very much for joining. Very grateful, and look forward to your contributions in the future. Spread the message. Tell others. These webinars are going to be helpful. They are well worth it. And if you missed it, well, these have been recorded, so you'll be able to listen to the recordings. And we hope enjoy as much as you would have if you had joined us today. But if you had joined us today, you had the opportunity of raising the questions and also getting some of the answers. You also had the opportunity of contributing, like Sally Kong contributed from Singapore. Thank you very much indeed. My special thanks to all the panel members, Dr. Dale Gardner, Dr. Sunil Shroff, Elizabeth Buggins, and well, until next time, well, have a good time, but remember, tribute to life. Thank you.